Welcome to Athletes and Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, where we've created a platform to help athletes and other alumni network and connect with each other and tap into various resources in career and health and finance and business. But more importantly, we look to interview former college and professional athletes, and we talk about their journey, their transition out of sport, ultimately into successful business leadership and entrepreneurship. And it's all about teaching aspiring athletes that there is life after sports. So excited today to have Jade Gummer. How you doing, Jade?
I'm great. How about yourself, Rob?
Doing great. So Jade was played football at Western Kentucky, and when he got done and kind of hung up the spike, so to speak, he went to law school and got into law and practiced law for many years, getting into ultimately being a sports attorney, getting some of those areas. Now. We'll talk a little about what he's doing today, but kind of getting a little bit to the NIL landscape, which a lot of people are doing. One perspective that we'll also discuss with Jade is he has, two sons that are playing ball now. He's got one in college at Furman, and then he's got another one that has one more year in high school. And then he's going to my alma mater, University of Delaware. There's fighting Blue Hens. So love to have that Blue Hen connection here. So you go Blue Hens. Yeah. So Jay, talk about playing sports growing up. How did that shape you leading up into college?
I think from a young age, it was really more community based. As you know, Rob, things have gotten a lot more massive and somewhat out of control with youth sports nowadays, but it was really about playing for your local community and developing those relationships and, all about the development and, being a teammate and the discipline that you kind of got from it. So, that really kind of shaped me and molded me. And it wasn't really until I was late into my high school years that I realized that not only would I have an opportunity to play at the next level, but that I wanted to play at the next level. And so really it was just about developing those fundamental skill sets and being a member of my community in good old Bel Air, Ohio.
Is that one? Do they have like the water tanks like Little Giants?
Absolutely. You bet.
You got to buy from the O'Shea's, right? For all those people that watch the Little Giants out there. That's right. Mine. So, one thing that just kind of came to mind is talk a little bit maybe about some of the differences when you were playing and now putting on your coaching hat. So, Jade coached, high school football and other forms of football throughout and watching your sons evolve. I mean, do you see differences in when you were growing up playing sports to kind of how it is today as being a coach and then a dad, having two boys playing?
Sure. I think the biggest thing is that, kids to play everything, right? And you would go from wrestling to baseball, to football, to basketball, and you would play all the sports. And now, with elite teams and travel ball and club ball, think kids are starting to be a lot more specialized. So you really have to do a good job in not only your recruiting, so to speak, but your retention of players, right? And obviously being here in the state of Florida, that gets extremely difficult because, open enrollment and, so kids are kind of the high school transfer portal is hit. And so it's difficult. So you're making sure that those relationships, stay strong and ensuring that, kids are still able to play multiple sports if they're 2 or 3 sport athletes. So I think that's, kind of been one of the biggest changes, but ensuring we've done a good job of ensuring those relationships, kind of through the years. And obviously having 2 boys, having growing up with those group of young men and being able to stay with them from kind of the beginning of their process in Lake Nona Youth Sports here in Orlando, all the way through their high school days at, whatever high school may be here in Central Florida. So I think that would be probably the biggest development is, being able to keep kids if they're multi-sport athletes and to keep them in those sports. And then if they're able to, stay within your organization because of the loyalty and the trust that you've developed and rapport you've developed with them.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I guess all that stuff continues. Like I look back here on what you're saying, and I coached a travel baseball team for about 6 or 7 years with my son. And you just think about then it was kind of more about maybe kids switching teams because they wanted to be on a better team or, whatever it might be. But now there's a lot more implications, like you said, of just, finding the right fit and, the whole NIL landscape and creating these portals even at the young age. So let's talk about transition out of sport. And this is something that we'll touch on a little bit more later too with your background, as an attorney and helping athletes from that perspective. But when you were in school, was there any type of education beyond that 1 day workshop or where the school worked to kind of help athletes and educate them on what's next after they get done with sports?
Fortunately and unfortunately, there was nothing. Right, outside of just having a good guidance counselor that told you a job that maybe you could get into with your grades and your background. There really wasn't very much. But I was blessed because one, I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do and come from good family and had an understanding. So I felt like one of the lucky ones. But more importantly, what I had was a coach that constantly kept his foot to the metal and was inspiring you and telling you that you weren't good enough to play at the next level. So you better be thinking about your future career. And that was Jack Harbaugh, and kind of old throwback University of Michigan coach, and no nonsense, and nose to nose and toes to toes, running triple option. He was truly a throwback coach. So I was blessed to have that and to have that experience. And that's really kind of what I never thought about coaching at any point in time, really, in my early stage of my life. But the game and Coach Harbaugh gave so much to me in Western Kentucky University that's what really kind of pushed me and motivated me to want to give back, not just to the game of football, but to the greater community that I was living in here in Florida.
Is Jack's the dad of
yes,
Jim? And
yes. Okay. Of great footballer, right?
That's right. I mean, he was a great coach, and now he spawned off two sons. They've done pretty well for themselves, also.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So, and I think it's probably changing a little bit today. So maybe is now with your son playing at Furman. Do you see anything there? Or are they putting anything into their curriculum as far as life after sports?
I think the timeline of things and the development of things has really kind of changed. Even though Furman's an FCS school, the resources that they have available to them, obviously it's a high academic school, so they're focused on that kind of going in. But I think even at the higher levels of FBS football, the resources that are available to these kids are predicated on them understanding that at some particular time, football is going to stop, or basketball, or baseball, or lacrosse, whatever it is. The in football, 1.6% make it to the next level. So I think just the law of numbers tells you that at some point it's going to end. But they've got academic advisors and advisory board members and mental health counseling and internships and NIL and branding seminars and financial literacy seminars. So I think as NIL has evolved and as college sports has evolved, the support staff and the system that they're within has kind of grown to be able to better assist them and prepare them for what lies ahead, and maybe have them thinking, not just a year, but a few years in advance of what they want to do down the line.
Yeah, and that's great that they're doing that. I mean, I think more schools are probably making that effort. I think there's still, that's a big area of need for education. I mean, we've talked about at Alumni Direct with, getting together with our partners, resource partners, and going into athletic departments and saying, hey, we want to help develop this additional curriculum, not only for the current athletes, for the alumni athletes as well. And I think it just really to help them. And I think even, we talk about it from a recruiting perspective, is that might be something that's valuable. So, you're in that situation now, your son, your younger one, now going off to college after this year. But saying that, hey, as a university, we're not only looking at when your student athlete is at the school, but we're also looking at in the future when they become an alumni. We're also going to kind of care about them and help. And I think that's important to look to do stuff like that too.
That's right. And as a dad, right? And dad and coach myself, that's kind of what brought me to you, Rob, was I was doing my homework on, what sets University of Delaware apart from, other schools, and what's their alumni network look like. And that's how I found you, here in Florida and running Alumni Direct as a Delaware Blue Hen yourself, and that's kind of what I was looking into, because we had been to the Harvards and the Dartmouths and the Princetons and visited, some of those other Ivy League and Patriot League schools that you have pretty firm understanding of their reach and their bandwidth to trying to understand, what makes the University of Delaware special. And that was something that we were very intentional about in his recruiting process, was trying to understand that, because I'm always, as much of a proponent of football as I am, I'm also a realist in that even if you fulfill your full football experience, you're probably going to be a 28 to 30-year-old retiree. And so it's a short time. So what are you going to do on the back end of that? So, kind of preparing for that in advance is, something I think is prudent for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you look, so you got Rich Gannon, you got Joe Flacco, and then you got Rob Finkelstein. But actually,
That's right. That's right.
But you got a lot of people like me that are like the alumni that want to help out. I mean, I think that's important. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about networking, connecting, especially while you're still playing, and the importance of that. Talk about from your end when you were, in school and still playing, just how important that is, and even now looking back as a dad and a coach, even at the high school level, of being an athlete and tapping into the network.
Absolutely. I think it's really huge because, a lot of times, and I don't even think it matters as much to the reach of the university, whether you're going to a regional school or a local school. Now it's really about with the internet and social media and things like Alumni Direct. It's all, the information's all there for you. It's just, how do you synthesize it and make it work to your advantage. So I think, being able to reach out to distinguished alumni and develop, paid or unpaid internship opportunities, or understand that, sports adjacent opportunities that there may be for you. At the end of the day, the biggest thing that I believe is that as an athlete, you have a significant transferable skill set, right? The discipline, the timing, the connection, the training that you went through, and your commitment to that 4 or 5 year process is really appetizing to an employer. So, you've already kind of entered the threshold and held yourself above some of the other applicants in the applicant pool. And, dealing with a lot of CEOs and CFOs and C-suite folks in my law experience, I know that that's something that, the one thing that I didn't hear them talk about a lot was my education. What they talked more about was my experience as an athlete. And, I think that's extremely important. And I try to emphasize that to the guys that I coach. It's about relationships, because at the end of it all, no one's going to remember that you rushed for 5 yards of carry, but they are going to remember how you made them feel, and that you're a smart kid that understands that football is going to end at some particular point in time, and they want to be there to provide that opportunity for you.
Yeah, and that's such great advice. I mean, I think that we always talk about all the athlete skill set, the athlete DNA, and how important it is, on your resume per se. Like, I've talked to people that these athletes now, they're saying, hey, career services hasn't really given me the support I need, and it's not a knock on them. It's just there's only so much bandwidth. But they're like, well, you don't have a resume because you didn't do any internships. Well, you couldn't do any internships because you were playing, but your resume is being an athlete, and everything you just brought up is great. That's because right. It's right. Tap into that, and so know that as athletes that you've got a lot to offer, and like Jade's saying, corporations, companies want to hire that.
And I think, even more so now with the NIL being what it is, the true NIL, we all know there's kind of two different sides. There's the pay to play, and there's the branding side, right? And I think that branding side, treating yourself as the CEO of you, right, and your name, image, and likeness being, it's like hanging like shingle, and it's what you do with it, right? How do you manifest that, and what do you do to ensure that you're checking those boxes, or building that brand is extremely important. And I encourage, there's so many great influencers and speakers out there that touch on LinkedIn and other Instagram and Twitter, and all the things that speak on that, about building a brand. And that is an extreme opportunity now that literally the baseball player, the lacrosse player, the swimmer, all have that access. Even though they might not be an income generating, or they may be in an Olympic sport, they still have that same level playing field as it relates to being a brand.
Yeah, and that's great because I mean I think it's you're right. A lot of times people think NIL is just the big money and the portals, but you know what you brought up there with the branding. I mean it's such an opportunity. I was talking to a guy earlier today, and we're talking about careers, and just basically as an NIL athlete, you know, like you've got this opportunity to build your business and become an entrepreneur. And you know, like with your brand, you know, hey, you got to start an LLC and you have to pay taxes, and so they've got these mini businesses, the opportunity they're setting up, and not to mention, like what you were saying with the sponsors and the advertisers, that they also have that connection into them, which you know could parlay into you know some type of job when they're done with their plan. Staying on the NIL front, like what are you seeing from, like, say for example, everybody's always looking at the, you know, like we said, the big power five schools, and you know what these athletes are getting. But if you take it to like say a Furman or even to Delaware, like what kinds of opportunities are you seeing? You kind of touched on it, but for athletes that aren't necessarily at these bigger schools in the NIL landscape.
Yeah, I think what I've seen with my older son, and we talk about it frequently because it's not necessarily about the money. You know, sometimes it's exchange of of apparel or internships or ride along opportunities or the opportunity to network with an individual in the greater Greenville community. Or he did an internship this summer with a healthcare provider there in the in Greenville. So it's the opportunities that are supporters of the university or supporters of the football program that are in positions that of to hire and or mentor or give opportunities. I think as revenue share comes out, and that doesn't necessarily touch and concern everybody, the FCS programs or some of the smaller programs who don't opt in to the house settlement. But at the next level, at the Delaware level, for instance, we've kind of seen that rev share, kick in, and it's more relationship based, right? It's all who's tied into the program, and who has been longtime supporters in the business community, and there's so many opportunities available to the student athletes as a result of that, that otherwise wouldn't be available. So you're not really coming onto campus as as just without having any network at all, right? You've been elevated because of the visibility you have, as a student athlete, and having those fans and businesses and resources at your discretion.
Yeah, but it's very interesting, this whole dynamic, and you know it continues to evolve. And yeah, I think there's a lot of positives. I mean, people look at the negatives, but I mean, there's certainly positives on the whole NIL. So let's kind of switch gears and talk about alumni engagement. And obviously, that's something that's important to us at Alumni Direct. When you were at school, was there a push to bring athletes back, and not just for the one day golf tournament or the
Absolutely.
homecoming?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think one thing that I think was great about my personal experience at Western Kentucky University was that the greater Bowling Green community, the Hilltopper Athletic Foundation, what they did with Big Red, they've done an absolutely amazing job of taking Big Red, who's a arbitrary looking figure, and making it extremely popular with the programs and the platforms. They did several different things with NIL this year where they, utilized Big Red as, kind of the talking point, and they won several awards for that. But I think they've always done, and obviously great. Coach Hardball was a very radiating individual that drew in a lot of the community. So I think during my time there, which was late '90s, '94 to '98, they did an outstanding job. I think what becomes difficult, and this goes into that transition going into FBS, is as football becomes more about winning and more about revenue generation. I think what you saw is that during that transition, we've had a number of different coaches, right? Because it's kind of a platform program. We've had 6, maybe 7 different coaches since that time. So I think the ability to continue to develop that and bring everybody back has struggled a little bit, but they've always attempted to do that. So I think it's kind of struggled in recent years. They've done great with the NIL part, but the bringing back portion, I know I'm part of an alumni group of the class of 1998 and other guys that I played with, and we talk about that often, just about outreach opportunities and how do we get together and keep, kind of keep things going for our own sake, that we all, kind of played together and have a shared experience, even outside of Western.
Yeah, and I think it's yeah, it's a challenge, and I think probably, like you said, a big part of it is challenging coaches leaving, athletic directors leaving, but I think it's so
That's
important.
right.
I think most
President's
people, I think
leaving.
presidents, yeah, I mean, I think most people want to give back. I mean, I always talk about, like, even in my case, like I was on a call and we were talking to the athletic department about mentoring, and one of the guys that was on with me. Is a Hall of Fame player from Delaware and also played 10 years in the NFL. And he said, tap me in. I'd love to help. And I'm the same way. I mean, let me, how can I give back and mentor? And I think what I also like is I was talking to one person on a podcast, and they said at their school, they were bringing back the alumni athletes, but it didn't have to be necessarily within the sport that they played. And I think that's important too, because I think it's, once you're out in the real world, regardless of what sport, I think you bring a lot of value back to the student athletes. So, so like you playing football, you playing football, like, mentoring a basketball player or a swimmer, me being a runner, maybe mentoring a baseball player or a football player, is it just because we didn't do that sport, but just bringing our life experience and mentoring back. And I think, more schools should look to do that.
Absolutely.
So let's talk. We kind of covered on the whole alumni engagement. I want to talk about the transition out of sport. So for you, talk a little bit about, you played this sport your whole life as a kid and other sports, and now all of a sudden you're finished playing days. You're going to law school. How was your transition out of sport?
You know what? It was rough, if I'm being honest. And I told you before, I think I was one of the lucky ones because, I had good grades and I had good experiences. I had honestly good internships in the summers leading up to my playing days. I worked for the West Virginia State Department of Tax and Revenue, a gentleman that I knew from back home. So I had good experiences, and I kind of developed a fervor for sports law at the time when I was in school, and I knew a lot of guys that were coming out and probably were going to have the opportunity to play beyond their college days, and so I kind of got interested in the contract aspect of it. And so when I went to law school and got out of law school, I started taking. Or started with my NFLPA license, and kind of started doing that, being a contract advisor. But I will tell you this: it was the single most difficult identity crisis that I've ever had, and that's saying a lot, because what happens is you go from being so regimented that you're told when to get up and when to wake up and when to eat and when to practice and when to work out and when to sleep, almost military-ish for 5-6 years of your life. And all of a sudden you play a game on Saturday, you fly home, you come back on Sunday and have a team meeting, and on Monday somebody else is wearing your jersey and sitting in your locker. And it has the ability to be a very spiraling experience. So that's why I'm so adamant about, I was a pretty nominal and average lawyer, but I think what I have to offer to the student athlete and the kids that I coach, and the greater community of sports that we have here, is to share that experience and to help them begin to plan for it and to build relationships and be a dot connector and explain to them that that their sport isn't necessarily who they are, but what they do. Right? Because if you kind of reverse that, and it's who you are and not what you do, it becomes so much of your identity that it almost becomes impossible to carve that apart and still be able to press forward. And so I admittedly, it was very difficult for me, and but fortunately, I've got a good story to tell, and I'm thankful for that.
No, that's great, and you mirror a lot of what athletes go through. I mean, the biggest thing you hit on there is the whole identity. Is that your identity as a football player, or like me as a runner. That just all of a sudden you're out of that. So what maybe some words of advice, kind of putting on your story, your own story, your story as a coach, your story as a dad. Give some words of advice to athletes as they look to ultimately transition out of the sport, whether it's from college or professionally.
The biggest thing is be in a position. First of all, have a good team around you, right? Don't surround yourself with people that are doing exactly what you're doing, but reach outside of your network a little bit and be, inquire about, hey, who is that guy and or who is that gal and what do they do? Maybe they emulate some of the things you like. You see them, in a car you like, you think you might want to drive, or living in a neighborhood you may think you want to be in one day. And they kind of move about the university or campus, and you see them they kind of float through campus, and you're like, man, I want to be like that one day, right? And talk to those people, right? They're, you people don't really realize that, but you've got a platform, and that platform is an opportunity, to manifest and make those relationships. But I think the biggest thing for me is, I'm 30 years post, graduate from Western Kentucky University, and I've had a great first kind of career in sports and in business and in law, practicing law and managing teams in law and coaching. And the biggest thing for me is learning how to redefine success. Right before it was, did I get that block? Did we win that game? How many yards did I rush for? How many touchdowns did I score? And then it was, how many hours did I bill, and how big of a staff, and how much income did we generate? And now it's more about redefining that success, and what's the outreach, and how many others am I able to bring along with me? And how can I take everything that I've learned and that others have poured into me, and how do I do that in return to those that are coming behind me that really don't know what's ahead?
Yeah, no, it's as I always say, great nuggets there of giving the advice of what's next. The one thing that I didn't, I don't know if you had a chance to watch or listen to any of the other episodes, but the one thing I forgot to ask you, which I ask you now, is when you're looking back if you were to go kind of like Back to the Future in a time machine, what advice, 10 words or less, would you give to freshman Jade at Western Kentucky?
Jack Harbaugh said it: keep on keeping on. And that's the one thing. And like I said, I'm 30 years removed, and Coach Harbaugh told, and a great story. Coach Harbaugh told me, and I was being, lightly recruited. And when I spoke to him, and I was really kind of getting down to why I wanted to go to Western Kentucky. And the truth was, he told me I would never play. I was undersized, and that he really didn't know that I'd have an opportunity on the team. And I took a walk-on opportunity there, and I was a 4-year starter. And just understanding that I had to work for it. And every day he reminded me, just keep on keeping on. No matter how good things are going, stay even killed. No matter how bad things are going, stay even killed, and just keep grinding and keep on keeping on. That's it.
That's great. Now fast forward to senior Jade. What advice would you give him?
Don't worry about all the things that seem to matter, and run your race. I think that's the thing, is right now, we were blessed in that the information that was available and out there wasn't as great, other than a few magazines here and there that maybe came out in the summertime that told you who the good football players were, right? You had Wallies and Wimpies, and the Big Ten Big Ten ACC report. There were very few sports journalists and things of that nature, but now it's very frontal, right? These kids see it every day. They see stars, they see ratings, they see hype, and they start to compare their journey to other people. And comparison, as they say, is the thief of joy, right? So run your race, and be 1% better than you were yesterday, and just continue to, be in it for yourself and work hard, and, all the things that you want. There's an opportunity out there for you. And I firmly believe that if you want to play at the next level, there's an opportunity. It's just, what are you going to humble yourself to, to accept?
Yeah, I like that. That's great. So let's talk a little bit about you had a very successful law career. Talk about some of the things you're doing today, and what kinds of activities you're doing.
About 2 years ago, I decided to kind of make a pivot from big law, so to speak. I, kind of spent 20 plus years in kind of the same, think tank and of, aggressive litigation and being a litigator, which, what it really taught me was that I'm a teacher, right? Whether you're talking to a judge, or talking to a jury, or talking to your client, you're always trying to educate them on making the best decisions. And during that same time frame, I was also a coach, coaching youth sports, coaching high school sports. So I was always around student athletes, and having two boys in the house, I was the house that all the kids came to, right? So everybody was always hanging out. And now a lot of those kids are big time college football players who reach out to ask questions about NIL, about life, about business, about law, about finances, about terms in their contract. So, I just pride myself on being an elite dot connector. So what I did is, when I left Big Law, I kind of got out and started volunteering on some different boards, doing stuff like this, speaking on different podcasts. I worked with a doctor up at Indiana University, doing a podcast on the advent of NIL and kind of the development through the variations of different lawsuits and all of that, kind of bringing it from 2014 forward. And I really do a lot of studying on NIL and just kind of what it is as a social construct, and trying to understand it, and kind of what it is versus where it's going. So it's been a great experience, and that's kind of the pivot is being sports adjacent and offering counsel to individuals in the space.
That's great. I mean, and it's very rewarding with the coaching, and I'm sure, like, just with people coming back. I remember when I was coaching travel baseball, and the guy that would have been kind of like the elder statesman, so to speak, that had already gone through it, but he talked about how, like, the players just kept coming back, and I was the same way. Like, people come, the kids coming to my house too, but like, just as they got older, just kicking back into like going to like weddings and things like that, and just there's still fond memories
Absolutely.
of playing for
And
coach.
there's something special about turning on the TV on any given Thursday night, Friday night, or Saturday night, and seeing a guy that you coached, right, and just seeing them be successful, and seeing them walk across the stage and graduate. I take a lot of pride in that, and the fact that they text me after games, or reach out when they get their first rev share contract, and they want to go over it and kind of have those discussions. I think that's special.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so, everybody out there, you need the Jades of the world that are coaching, mentoring, helping. I mean, that's what it's all about. So, how can people find you?
I'm out there I'm at lawdoc4, LAWDOC number 4 on X. I'm Jade Gummer on LinkedIn, and I am WKU4 on Instagram, and pretty active on most platforms. So I appreciate anybody that like-minded individuals that want to link up. One other thing I would say is, Ryan Schachter. One other thing I did was really got involved with Success Beyond Game Day, and started work as a board member, a volunteer board member, and started working with them, and really focusing on the mental aspects, the mentalism behind sports, and how to try to maximize performance and things of that nature. And obviously, you had Ryan on the show. I watched that episode. Ryan does a fantastic job, along with Samantha Card, and they're doing some incredible things with Success Beyond Game Day. So I would encourage all your listeners to follow them as well if they're not already.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And you can find us at alumnidirect.com, and the podcast is on our YouTube channel, as well as across all the different networks, Spotify and Apple. And we just encourage people to, follow and watch and listen to these episodes. I mean, each week, I brought up before, but we always get these great nuggets from our guests like Jade. And I think it's just important. We definitely want to make an impact in helping athletes as they transition out of sport. So again, thank you so much, Jade. This has been great.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity, Rob. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys for listening.
My pleasure.